When a German shepherd at a rescue center went into labor, everyone braced themselves to witness something extraordinary. After weeks of dedicated care, the moment finally arrived for her to give birth. However, what happened next was utterly astonishing. Instead of puppies, creatures with unusual size and bizarre fur texture emerged. Even the faint sounds they emitted seemed off. The veterinarian's hands shook as she carefully inspected the newborns, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Within moments, silence fell over the room, and hushed murmurs spread. These aren't puppies. What had the dog actually delivered? And why did the vet suddenly insist that everyone leave? What she uncovered that night changed everything and brought tears to everyone present. Stay tuned until the very end. The truth will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching from? Let us know your country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far our stories reach. Outside, a cold wind howled as the last glimmers of sunlight disappeared behind the shelter's gates. Inside, the staff busied themselves preparing to close for the evening when the screeching of tires shattered the quiet. A small, rusty pickup truck pulled up, and a man hastily climbed out, his face pale and filled with worry. Without uttering a word, he opened the vehicle's rear door, and that's when they saw her. Curled up on a tattered blanket lay a German shepherd, her breathing shallow, her coat matted with dirt. Her ribs protruded beneath her fur, and those deep amber eyes reflected pain and utter exhaustion. Yet, beneath all that suffering, there was something else, something hard to describe. A soft, urgent cry for aid carried on the breeze as a man quietly pleaded by the roadside. There she lay, motionless. "I believe she's expecting," he murmured. Without hesitation, Linda, the shelter supervisor, called for immediate help. "Fetch a stretcher," she commanded, "and get Dr. Harris here right away." 2 volunteers hurried toward her, moving with both care and speed. When they gently lifted the trembling dog, a faint, heart-wrenching whine slipped from her throat. The sound was so delicate yet profound, it caused even the toughest staff member to stop. Inside the shelter's medical bay, the sharp scent of antiseptics lingered. Minutes later, Dr. Harris arrived, his forehead creased with concern as he knelt beside the newcomer. "Easy now, girl," he whispered tenderly, resting his hand on her head. Her eyes flicked toward him, frightened, yet harboring a glimmer of trust. A quick check confirmed it. Dr. Harris said quietly, "She's definitely pregnant and very close to giving birth. She's severely undernourished. We'll need to stabilize her overnight," he continued. "She's endured unimaginable suffering." Linda nodded, gently rubbing the dog's back. "We'll call her Grace," she said softly, "because after everything she's survived, that's exactly what she represents." The room fell silent, broken only by the steady rhythm of her breathing. Volunteers gathered nearby, offering warm blankets and soothing words. For what seemed like the first time in ages, Grace closed her eyes, not from fear, but relief. She was finally safe. At least, that's what everyone believed. Outside, the wind howled once more, carrying with it a faint whisper that caused Dr. Harris to hesitate. A strange feeling gnawed at him. This rescue was unlike any other. This dog, this mother, had arrived bearing a secret no one was yet prepared to confront. The initial night following Grace's rescue was unsettlingly silent. Normally, the shelter buzzed with soothing noises of animals settling down, gentle barks, soft meows, and the faint rustling of hay. However, near Grace's space, an oppressive quiet prevailed. She lay curled up on her blanket, her head resting gently on her paws, amber eyes fixed intently on the door, as if anticipating someone or something. Linda checked on her every hour. "She hasn't eaten," she reported to Dr. Harris with a concerned frown. "Not even a drop of water." Dr. Harris knelt beside the kennel, speaking in a calm, reassuring tone. "Grace, it's okay now. You're safe here." Still, the dog remained motionless. Her ears twitched slightly, but her stare never wavered from the shadowy hallway. Suddenly, out of the blue, she released a low, guttural growl, deep, cautionary, and protective. Dr. Harris glanced towards the corridor, but there was no sign of anything unusual. "She's picking up on something," he whispered. "Either she's still anxious, or she's aware of something beyond our perception." By dawn, her behavior had become even more peculiar. When volunteers attempted to clean her enclosure, Grace would station herself firmly in one corner, emitting soft growls whenever anyone approached too closely. She appeared to guard a bare spot on her blanket, her body taut and vigilant. "She behaves as if she's hiding her pups," Mia, one of the volunteers, remarked. "Yet she hasn't given birth." That night, the shelter's security cameras flickered due to the old wiring, which often caused disruptions. But what unfolded next unsettled Linda deeply. The footage caught Grace pacing restlessly back and forth before abruptly halting. Her ears pricked up, nose raised, and tail stiffened. Then she started whining, pressing her body up against the metal bars as if yearning to reach someone beyond them. At daybreak, Linda discovered Grace fully awake, her gaze fixed on the same spot near the door. Once more, her food lay untouched. "She didn't sleep at all," Linda murmured softly, rubbing her arms against the cold. What could she be waiting for? Dr. Harris examined Grace's blood work and found nothing unusual. "Physically, she's fine," he remarked. "But there's a psychological factor at play. Trauma, fear, or perhaps instinct," he sighed deeply. "Nonetheless, this degree of alertness is abnormal." That evening, as the shelter lights dimmed, Grace started clawing at her blanket. Her breathing grew rapid, and soft whimpers echoed down the hallways. The atmosphere felt heavy, charged with something intangible. Linda cautiously approached the kennel, her heart racing. Grace turned her head, eyes shimmering in the faint glow. Then she let out a single sharp bark, desperate and warning. It was the kind of sound that made every nerve stand on edge. Something was coming. Thunder rumbled across the sky as dark clouds amassed above the shelter. Rain pounded against the windows, while lightning briefly lit up the kennels with an eerie glow. Most of the animals had fallen silent, sensing the approaching storm. Everyone except Grace. She paced restlessly in circles, her breathing labored, tail held rigid with nerves. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the door, as though expecting something unseen. Working late, Linda noticed Grace's uneasy pacing on the security monitor. "She's deteriorating," she murmured, reaching for her raincoat before making her way to the medical room. The moment Grace opened the door, a sharp bark echoed down the hallway, her usual warning cry. But this time it wasn't anger. It was pain that resonated in her tone. "Dr. Harris," Linda called urgently. Within moments, the veterinarian hurried in, rain droplets still clinging to his hair from the storm outside. A single glance at Grace turned his face grave. "She's going into labor," he announced, "much too early." They swiftly arranged a sterile area with blankets, towels, and medical tools. Grace settled down, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Linda knelt beside her, caressing her back softly. "It's all right, darling," she whispered soothingly. You're safe here now." Yet Grace remained tense. Her breath grew quick and nearly panicked. Every noise, the thunderclap, the howling wind, the creaking of the aged roof, made her flinch. Suddenly, she emitted a deep groan, followed by a faint whimper. The first contraction had started. Hours slipped by as the clock edged closer to midnight, and the storm raged fiercer outside. Grace fought through each push, her body weakened by lack of nutrition and fatigue. Dr. Harris moved with care, murmuring calming words as he prepared to assist. "You can do this, girl. Just a little more." Then came a faint, delicate sound, almost a tiny squeak. Linda's heart soared. She did it, she thought. But when Dr. Harris leaned in for a closer look, his initial joy shifted into puzzlement. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully as he lifted the newborn carefully wrapped in a towel. "Wait," he whispered. The shape wasn't what he expected. The coat was darker and shorter, and the body felt strangely heavy. He inspected it carefully under the light, then suddenly froze in place. This didn't look like a normal puppy. Linda blinked, her smile fading away. "What do you mean?" she asked. Before he could respond, Grace let out another strained cry, accompanied by another contraction. One after another, more newborns appeared, yet each one looked identical. None resembled ordinary puppies. They remained silent and motionless for a few seconds before twitching faintly, their movements disturbingly synchronized. A flash of lightning illuminated the room again, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Dr. Harris exchanged a glance with Linda, his face ashen. "Something's not right," he muttered. Grace whimpered softly, curling protectively around the strange litter. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she gently nudged each one with her nose. Linda took a step back, her voice trembling slightly. What are they?" Dr. Harris was at a loss for words. He only stared, the thunder outside matching his growing dread. "I don't know," he whispered. "But whatever they are, they're definitely not puppies." The atmosphere was thick with tension. Only the steady hum of the ceiling fan broke the silence as Dr. Harris leaned closer over the table, his gloved hands trembling a little. The newborns, or whatever they were, crouched tightly beneath a warm lamp. Their bodies were small, but something about them felt inherently wrong. Their limbs were shorter, fur unusually dense and charcoal gray, and their breathing barely perceptible. Linda swallowed hard. "Are they even alive?" she whispered. Dr. Harris gently placed his stethoscope against one of the small chests. "Yes," he whispered. "Their hearts are beating, but much slower than what you'd expect from healthy puppies." He grabbed a small flashlight and furrowed his brow as he examined the first pup's face. Its features seemed unusual: flat nose, underdeveloped ears, and when he lifted its paw, faint, sharp ridges appeared where nails should normally be. "This is baffling," he murmured. "I've never encountered anything like this before." Grace let out a soft whimper, curling protectively around the curious litter. Her eyes flicked anxiously between Dr. Harris and Linda, filled with both fear and fierce resolve. It was as if she understood their differences and didn't mind. They were her babies. Linda hesitated, her voice trembling. Could this be some kind of deformity, maybe caused by malnutrition or injury? Dr. Harris shook his head. "No, this goes beyond that. Their skeletal structure feels fundamentally different." He reached for a sterile cloth and gently wiped one of the newborn's faces. The tiny creature emitted a low, eerie squeal, not quite a bark, not quite a whine. The sound was unsettling. Suddenly, lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the room. Exhaling sharply, Dr. Harris said, "I need to run some tests. Blood work, tissue samples, everything. But we can't move them just yet." At the mention of tests, Grace growled, her body stiffening and her lips curling slightly as she shielded the pups with her own. Linda stepped toward her cautiously. "It's okay, girl. No one's going to hurt them." Still, Dr. Harris couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in his gut. "Linda," he murmured nervously, casting a wary glance her way. "Something feels off here. Their biology, it's almost as if they've been modified." "Modified?" she echoed, her eyes widening in surprise. He gave a grim nod. "Genetically, this looks familiar. Years ago, when I was stationed near the research district, I encountered similar cases. Some laboratories conducted experiments on animals, aiming to create hybrids with enhanced resistance and immunity. Those labs were shut down after public outcry." His gaze drifted toward the newborns. "These markings, their breathing patterns, they match." Thunder rumbled again, causing the shelter's walls to tremble. Grace whimpered softly, licking her offspring as though she sensed an approaching threat. Linda whispered low, "Do you think she might have escaped from one of those labs?" Dr. Harris remained silent, his quietness speaking volumes. They stood motionless for a long moment. Then, as lightning illuminated the room once more, one of the newborns slowly opened its eyes, which glowed faintly in the darkness. Dr. Harris froze, his heart pounding fiercely. "My God," he breathed, "what have they done to you?" By dawn, the storm had subsided. But tension within the shelter only intensified. Rumors spread swiftly among the staff. Nobody knew the full details of what had transpired in the medical room, yet everyone felt it was far from normal. Grace's kennel was sealed off overnight, and her unusual litter was kept under constant surveillance. Linda stood by the reception desk, nervously tapping her pen. "We can't keep this from the others much longer," she admitted. Dr. Harris, weary from a restless night, pressed his fingers to his temples. Exhaustion etched across his face. "We have to," he responded with conviction. "At least until we figure out exactly what we're facing." Yet the whispers had already spread and taken hold. One volunteer insisted she had seen the newborn puppies glowing faintly beneath the heat lamp. Another was certain she heard one of them hissing instead of whining. Fear began to ripple through the shelter like wildfire. When Dr. Harris stepped into the main hall, the chatter immediately ceased. Numerous anxious eyes tracked his every move as he passed by. "Please, everyone, stay calm," he urged, striving to maintain a steady voice. Grace, the German shepherd, had given birth prematurely. Her pups were unusual, yes, but stable. No one was in danger. The silence that followed, however, suggested otherwise. "Unusual," someone muttered under their breath. "That's not what I'm hearing." "Are those even dogs?" another murmured doubtfully. Dr. Harris's patience wore thin. "Enough," he snapped. "They're being closely monitored. Nobody goes near that room without explicit permission." Meanwhile, Grace rested quietly in her enclosure, her body wrapped protectively around her litter. Her eyes tracked every movement beyond the glass. When a janitor accidentally dropped a mop nearby, Grace emitted a low, menacing growl, a deep rumble that sent a chill down his spine. "Doc," Linda whispered later that afternoon, "this can't continue. The others are frightened. Even the other animals are on edge." Truly, the cats refused their food, and several dogs barked incessantly whenever they walked past Grace's kennel. The entire shelter felt charged with an unsettling, unseen tension. Dr. Harris exhaled deeply. "I'll move her to the isolation wing," he decided. "Less noise, fewer eyes." By evening, Grace had been carefully relocated to a small, dimly lit room at the building's far end, once reserved for quarantined animals. The air inside was chillier, and the flickering light offered just enough illumination to push back the encroaching shadows. As the door clicked shut behind them, Grace lifted her head sharply. Her ears twitched, and her body grew rigid. For a brief instant, she emitted a low, trembling whine, as if to warn everyone that disturbing her was a grave error. Outside, Dr. Harris turned to Linda. "No one goes into that room unless I'm there," he stated firmly. "Whatever is unfolding, it's only just starting." The following morning, the isolation wing felt unusually cold. The steady hum of fluorescent lighting reverberated through the deserted hallway as Dr. Harris arrived, carrying a clipboard in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. He hadn't rested in nearly 30 hours, but a mix of apprehension and curiosity kept him alert. Linda trailed silently behind him, clutching a file packed with Grace's medical records. The moment he stepped inside, Grace raised her head. Her golden eyes were sharp and watchful. Unlike before, she neither barked nor growled, yet her body remained rigid, muscles taut beneath her fur. She observed him with wary suspicion, as if she anticipated an action she would resent. "Calm down, girl," Dr. Harris whispered gently, lowering himself to a crouch. "I'm not here to harm you." He proceeded toward the incubator where 6 newborns lay. Small and gray, they were unnervingly still. Puppies at this age would usually squirm and yelp, but these ones emitted only faint, rhythmic noises, almost like synchronized breathing. It was far too orderly to be natural. He began his examination with care. "Temperature stable," he said softly, jotting down notes. The pup's heart rate was slower than anticipated, and its breathing remained steady but shallow. When someone attempted to lift one of the puppies, Grace responded with a soft growl, her tail tense and rigid. Kneeling beside her, Linda whispered soothingly, "It's okay, Grace. He's trying to help." Under the glare of the examination lamp, Dr. Harris closely inspected the puppy's body. He noticed faint, nearly imperceptible scars near the neck, symmetrical and unnatural. "Take a look at this," he said quietly, beckoning Linda to come closer. "These marks aren't natural, they're surgical." Linda gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "You mean someone performed surgery on them?" she asked. Dr. Harris's expression turned serious. "Yes, before they were even born. In utero modification. This is sophisticated and advanced work." He then carefully drew a blood sample, placing it into a small vial. The liquid inside shimmered slightly under the light, darker than typical blood and with an almost metallic sheen. "This can't be," he muttered to himself. "Blood from an animal shouldn't look like this." Grace's growl deepened as she gently nudged the incubator closer with her nose, her breathing growing quicker, seemingly sensing an imminent threat. Dr. Harris leaned toward one of the newborns, shining his penlight into its eyes. The pupils contracted slowly before glowing with a faint blue light for a brief moment. He froze, startled. "Linda, did you see that?" She nodded, her face as pale as a sheet. "What are they?" she whispered. Before he could respond, one of the puppies emitted a strange vibration, a low, harmonious hum that filled the room. The incubator's glass trembled slightly. Instantly, Grace positioned herself between the puppies and the people, releasing a sharp, defensive bark. The noise ceased abruptly, and silence fell, though the atmosphere seemed charged with tension. Dr. Harris gradually lowered his pen light, his heart pounding fiercely. Turning toward Linda, he spoke in a hushed, strained tone. "This isn't something natural." Linda's voice quivered as she murmured, "Someone made these." "For what purpose?" Dr. Harris asked, glancing back at the pups and then at Grace. She regarded him with cautious, sharp eyes that suggested they had uncovered something never meant to be discovered. That night, sleep eluded Dr. Harris completely. Sitting alone in his office, he listened to the soft patter of rain against the windows while his mind replayed the haunting image of the glowing eyes. After 2 decades working with animals, nothing had unsettled him this deeply before. A mixture of curiosity and fear stirred within him, compelling him to return to the isolation wing long after everyone else had left. The shelter lay quiet, corridors dimly illuminated. As he stepped into the room, Grace immediately became alert. Her ears twitched, her eyes focused sharply. "Calm down, girl," he whispered gently. "Just one last check." She didn't growl this time, but she remained tense, her gaze locked on him, tail low and stiff. The newborn pups slept, their little chests rising and falling in an eerie, synchronized rhythm. Turning on a small lamp, "Doctor?" Harris began a meticulous examination of each pup, determined to uncover the truth. When he gently lifted the 3rd pup and ran his fingers along its side, he felt something unusual, a small, hard object embedded under the skin near its shoulder. Frowning, he pressed lightly, recognizing the unmistakable shape. "What in the world?" he muttered under his breath. Retrieving a sterilized scalpel, he made a precise cut, no wider than a single thread. A droplet of metallic-tinged blood seeped out, and beneath the light, a tiny silver disc shimmered. He froze in place. Linda, who had silently slipped in behind him, gasped aloud. "What is that?" she whispered. Dr. Harris delicately removed the object using tweezers and set it down on a tray. It was a microchip unlike any he had ever encountered. Instead of the usual serial ID, it bore an engraved insignia, Project E9, along with a small string of numbers beneath. "Project E9, he muttered, his throat suddenly dry. The name stirred something long buried within his memory. Years before joining the shelter, he had heard whispers of a secret research initiative that experimented on animals, aiming to develop hybrids resistant to diseases, radiation, and extreme climates. That project had ostensibly been terminated. Ostensibly. Linda's voice trembled. "Do you think she was connected to that program?" Dr. Harris glanced at Grace, who was now sitting upright, her eyes locked on the chip. Her ears twitched as if the metallic scent was familiar. "No," he said softly. "She wasn't part of it. She escaped from it." Grace uttered a low whine, nudging one of her pups closer to her chest. Her body quivered, not from fear, but from something deeper, like a buried memory resurfacing. Dr. Harris continued to study the chip, the engraved numbers catching the lamp's glow. "If this came from a government laboratory," he whispered, "then we are facing a serious threat." Outside, thunder rumbled once more, soft yet ominous. For the first time, Dr. Harris truly understood that this was far from an ordinary birth. It marked the start of an event no one was supposed to witness. The following morning, the shelter was unusually still. The volunteers moved about with anxious looks, their hushed conversations barely audible along the corridors. News about Grace's unusual litter had circulated, and an unsettling feeling hung in the air. Dr. Harris sat quietly in his office, a mysterious microchip resting on a cloth next to his computer. The inscription, Project E9, engraved on it, weighed heavily on his mind. Linda entered, holding a steaming mug of coffee. "You've been here all night," she said gently. He gave a small nod without meeting her gaze. "I ran the chip's serial number through every animal database I could find. Local, national, even private laboratory systems. Nothing showed up," he explained. Linda frowned. "So, it's impossible to trace?" "Almost," he replied softly, "except for one detail." He tilted the chip under the light, revealing a faded emblem near the edge, a stylized H enclosed within a hexagon. "That's Helios Research," he said, "a biotech company just outside town. It was shut down 8 years ago after animal rights violations were uncovered." Linda's eyes widened in recognition. "I remember that name. Didn't they experiment with cross-species DNA therapy?" Dr. Harris nodded somberly. "They were attempting to engineer immune systems that could withstand any known disease. They claimed it was for medical advancements, but the animals involved endured great suffering." He exhaled heavily, pressing his fingers to his temples. "It appears Grace was one of their test subjects." He navigated through archived files on the computer until a declassified report appeared, its screen filled with grainy photographs. Metal cages, laboratory dogs with shaved coats, and cold metallic tables lined with specimens meticulously labeled and dated. Each photograph carried a code from E9A to E9G. Linda covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God." Dr. Harris continued scrolling until he spotted a familiar face, a German shepherd with striking amber eyes, designated E9F. "That's her," he murmured. "Her name, Grace." The records revealed that the test subjects in Project E9 underwent experimental gene splicing designed to boost their resilience, intelligence, and adaptive instincts. The project had been terminated following a fire that devastated part of the research facility. Although official documents claimed all test animals perished, it was clear one had survived. Linda collapsed into a chair, hands trembling. That dog must have escaped during the blaze and managed to survive for all these years. Dr. Harris nodded slowly. Now she had given birth to offspring carrying the same unique genetic signature. Rising, he gazed out the window as rain fell softly against the glass. If the government discovered this, they would come after her and her pups. To them, these beings would be nothing more than scientific data, not living creatures. From the isolation wing came a faint, soft whine from Grace, as if she sensed the serious implications of their discovery. Linda turned to Dr. Harris, her voice barely a whisper. "What's our next move?" Dr. Harris glanced once more at the file before snapping it shut. "We protect them," he stated resolutely, "whatever the cost." Outside, lightning slashed across the overcast morning sky, signaling that the tempest surrounding Grace's past was far from over. By the second day following Grace's birth, the shelter no longer felt like a safe haven. Instead, it resembled a hidden secret. Everyone was too frightened to speak openly. The atmosphere was thick with tension, an unseen burden weighing heavily on every heart. Volunteers who had once smiled while feeding the animals now steered clear of Grace's hallway altogether. Even the dogs grew restless, barking uneasily whenever her scent wafted through the vents. Linda stood in the break room, her hands tightly clutching a mug that had long gone cold. Across from her, 2 volunteers whispered urgently. "I'm telling you, those creatures aren't normal," one whispered. "They don't cry. They don't eat like typical puppies. It feels wrong," the other agreed. Linda slammed the mug on the table, startling them. They're just babies, she snapped. None of this was their choice. But what if they're dangerous? The younger volunteer asked, her eyes wide with worry. What if they grow up? Enough, Linda interrupted firmly, cutting her off. Yet deep down, she shared the same fear. What if they were truly a threat? What if the scientists had created something that was never meant to exist? Meanwhile, in the isolation room, Grace lay with her litter curled close to her chest. Although she hadn't eaten much, her strength was gradually returning. Her eyes tracked every shadow, every sound. When Dr. Harris entered, she no longer growled. She merely watched him with quiet vigilance. He lowered himself onto a stool, weariness etched deeply across his features. "You didn't ask for this either, did you?" he whispered softly. "All you wanted was peace." Grace tilted her head slightly, as if she was beginning to grasp the situation. Behind him, Linda slipped in quietly, carrying a tray filled with food. "The staff are frightened," she whispered. "Some of them want to contact animal control." Dr. Harris looked up sharply. "They can't do that. If they do, the wrong people will catch wind of it. Those laboratories, the same ones, might still be lurking nearby." Rising to his feet, his voice grew tense. "And if they discover she's alive, they'll take her back." Tears welled up in Linda's eyes. "So, what are we supposed to do? Keep them hidden forever?" Dr. Harris exhaled slowly. "Maybe just long enough for me to figure out who's behind Project E9. Until then, we protect them." A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the setting sun stretched long shadows down the corridor, bathing the shelter in an eerie glow of orange and unease. At last, Linda broke the silence, her voice shaking. "Others might see monsters," she murmured, "but I see a mother fighting for her children." Dr. Harris nodded in agreement. "Exactly. That's why we can't let the world take them away." Grace looked up toward them, her golden eyes shimmering. For a brief moment, the fear that clouded the room seemed to lift, replaced by something far more profound. Hope. It all started with a phone call. Early that morning, as the sun's pale light slipped through the blinds, the shelter's landline rang. Linda answered, anticipating a typical question about adoptions. But the voice on the other end wasn't a hopeful pet seeker. It was cold, authoritative, and straight to the point. "Dr. Harris, please," the man said. "This is Agent Keller from the Department of Agricultural and Biotechnical Affairs." An anonymous tip had just been received, reporting an undocumented animal birth that might involve biohazard risks. A team was being dispatched to the facility without delay. Linda froze in place. "Wait, how did you find out?" she stammered, but the call abruptly ended. Her heart raced as she hurried toward Dr. Harris's office. Looking up from his paperwork, he immediately noticed the alarm etched on her face. "They're aware," she gasped. "Someone must have informed them." Dr. Harris's complexion turned ashen. "No one from here would do that," he said, trailing off mid-sentence. Outside, the faint hum of engines grew louder. Black vans rolled up to the shelter's entrance, their darkly tinted windows catching the faint morning light. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, their jackets emblazoned with the insignia of the Biocurity Unit. Pandemonium erupted within the shelter. Confused volunteers gathered, while the agents spread through the building, flashing badges alongside official, sealed orders. "We've received intelligence regarding genetically engineered animals on this property," Agent Keller declared, his voice firm and unyielding. "All creatures must be secured for immediate inspection." Dr. Harris stepped forward, blocking the hallway. You can't just storm in here. These are rescued animals, not laboratory subjects. Keller's expression remained impassive. That depends on what we discover. He signaled 2 agents. Take them to the isolation wing immediately. Linda's stomach tightened. She exchanged a fearful glance with Dr. Harris before they both hurried down the hall ahead of the officers. Grace sensed the danger instantly. The moment heavy footsteps echoed near her door, she let out a low growl, positioning her body protectively around the pups. The agents shoved past them, raising their scanning devices toward the incubator. The devices emitted an immediate, loud, rhythmic, and unmistakable series of beeps, confirming the presence of anomalous genetic markers. One agent declared, Level 3 classification. Keller spun abruptly toward Harris. Where did these creatures originate? He demanded. They were rescued, Harris replied, his voice shaky. From the streets. We had no idea, Keller countered coldly. Our data suggests otherwise. He paused briefly, then added, These identifiers correspond to records from a discontinued initiative. Project E9, Grace growled fiercely, her voice resonating down the narrow corridor. The agents recoiled, visibly startled. Sedate her, Keller commanded. No, Linda shouted, stepping forward. But before anyone could move, Grace lunged, not to attack, but to defend. Her threatening growl echoed like thunder. For the first time, fear flashed in Keller's eyes. Dr. Harris remained frozen as pandemonium erupted around him. Only now did he realize the secret they had tried so hard to conceal had become a matter of national importance, and that Grace's struggle was far from over. The room erupted into frenzy as agents barked out orders. The sound of boots pounding the tile floor echoed through the cramped hallway. Grace's protective bark shook the walls, primal and fierce. Her fur stood on end as she positioned herself between her newborns and the men advancing with tranquilizer rifles. Stand down, Dr. Harris yelled, his voice cracking amid the turmoil. She'll only get more agitated if you provoke her. Agent Keller remained unflinching. That creature is deemed dangerous and classified, he snapped. Neutralize her before anyone gets hurt. Grace's growl deepened into a low, menacing rumble, causing even the agents to hesitate. Her eyes, vivid and wild, flickered anxiously between her puppies and the intruders. Every fiber of her being screamed that they posed a threat. She retreated slowly toward the incubator, nudging her babies closer to the wall, her trembling figure standing as a shield forged from sheer bravery. Dr. Harris stepped forward, positioning himself between Keller and his target. Please, she's not aggressive. She's just terrified. Let me handle this. But Keller remained resolute. Step aside, Doctor. Linda's voice cut sharply through the tension, heavy with emotion. You're aiming guns at a mother protecting her newborns. Suddenly, an agent fired a dart, which missed by mere inches, embedding itself in the wall. Grace let out a fierce bark and lunged forward, not to attack, but to repel them. The abrupt movement caught the team off guard, causing one agent to stumble into a tray of instruments. The metallic clatter echoed loudly, slicing through the turmoil like a warning bell. Seizing the opportunity, Grace gently grabbed one of her pups by the scruff and dashed towards the side door of the isolation wing. Stop her, Keller shouted, but it was already too late. Linda had pulled the emergency lever, initiating a lockdown delay. The steel doors hesitated briefly, just long enough for Grace to slip through. Dr. Harris's heart raced as alarms blared around him. He faced Keller, his voice shaky. If you chase her now, you'll kill her. Let me bring her back. Keller's jaw clenched tightly. You have 10 minutes before we initiate full containment." Outside, rain began to fall again, making the ground slick and dark. Grace sprinted across the yard, disappearing into the storm. Clutching the puppy tightly in her mouth, her body moved with a powerful yet frantic energy. Lightning streaked across the sky, casting her shadow sharply against the chain-link fence. Dr. Harris and Linda trudged through the mud, their voices gentle but urgent as they called out, "Grace, come back, you're safe." Yet, she paid no heed. Her instincts had taken command. She sensed danger in the air, heard the distant shouts, and felt the surge of fear. Reaching the fence, she began clawing at the damp earth beneath it, her paws ripping through the wet soil. Another bolt of lightning illuminated her eyes, resolute, fierce, and fiercely maternal. With one final desperate push, she slipped through the narrow opening and disappeared into the storm. Linda dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. "She's gone," she whispered. Dr. Harris stood in the rain, soaked through and trembling. "No," he murmured quietly, focusing on the darkness where Grace had vanished. "She's protecting them, just the way she knows how." Behind them, Keller's voice rang out coldly. "Then we'll find her." But Dr. Harris was certain about one thing. Grace would never allow it, not while her heart still beat. The tempest raged relentlessly through the night, pouring sheets of ice-cold rain onto the earth. Each flash of lightning revealed Grace's silhouette, darting swiftly among the trees, her breath visible in the chilly air. Mud clung stubbornly to her paws, and her drenched fur weighed her down, yet she pressed on without hesitation. The tiny pup nestled in her jaws whimpered softly, its fragile body warmed by her own. Behind her, the roar of engines shattered the quiet darkness. The chase was on. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, chaos unfolded. Agents shouted commands into their radios, their flashlights cutting through the steady rain as they dispersed across the open fields. Keller spoke sharply into his headset. "Spread out." She couldn't have wandered far. His tone was commanding, yet beneath it lingered a hint of apprehension. Even he recognized this pursuit was far from routine. Nearby, Dr. Harris and Linda stood by the gate, their faces ashen with worry. "She won't make it out there alive," Linda murmured. Harris shook his head firmly. "You don't understand. She's far smarter than they realize. She's been hunted before." In the dense forest, Grace moved like a ghost, silent and alert, every muscle coiled with tension, senses razor-sharp. The rain did a good job masking her scent, but the distant beams of flashlights pushed her deeper into the thicket. Eventually, she found a small hollow beneath an ancient oak tree, concealed beneath a tangle of roots and vines. Gently, she placed the pup down, licking its tiny face before curling around it protectively. Though her breathing was uneven, her eyes, golden and resolute, remained focused and vigilant. She could hear the pursuers closing in, voices, footsteps, and the mechanical drone of thermal scanners sweeping through the forest. Grace froze completely, ears twitching with every sound, her heart hammering in her chest. For a brief moment, a flashlight beam swept just inches from her hiding spot. The agent holding it stopped and frowned, the air heavy with the scent of rain and tension. Then, thunder cracked loudly overhead, startling a flock of birds that exploded from the treetops. This sudden commotion was the distraction Grace needed. The agent turned away, muttering, "Nothing here." Grace remained motionless until the noises faded into the distance. Gradually, she raised her head, straining to listen. Only the rain answered in silence. Drawing a shaky breath, She pressed her pup closer to her. Her body felt frail, wounds throbbing with pain, yet her resolve remained unyielding. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, Dr. Harris sat at his desk, soaked through and trembling. He gazed intently at a map of the nearby terrain, tracing the outline of the forest with his fingertip. "She'll make her way toward the river," he whispered. "It's instinct. She follows water to disguise her scent." Linda's voice quivered as she asked, "What do we do then?" He met her determined gaze. "We find her before they do." Outside, a bolt of lightning struck a hill in the distance, casting an eerie pale glow over the forest. Beyond the agent's reach, Grace pressed onward, carrying not only her pup, but the fragile hope of survival for them all. The once hunted mother had transformed into a shadow stalking her pursuers, and the storm was just beginning to unveil its mysteries. Morning arrived heavy and gray, the forest still dripping from last night's downpour. Mist hung low, wrapping the trees in a delicate, ghostly shroud. Dr. Harris and Linda slogged through the muddy ground, their flashlights struggling to cut through the dense fog. Each step was tentative, every tiny sound amplified in the stillness, the snap of a twig, the soft rustle of soaked leaves. Somewhere within this tangled haze of rain and mist, Grace concealed herself. "She's been out here all night," Linda whispered, her voice tight with worry. "She must be exhausted," Dr. Harris agreed, glancing down at the map clutched in his hand. "There's a stream up ahead," he murmured softly. "If I were in her place, that's exactly where I'd head." The flowing water could conceal her scent. Around them, the forest buzzed quietly with the hum of insects and the faint echoes of voices searching in the distance. The government agents were closing in. Radios crackled faintly from deeper within the woods. Time was running out. Then a sound, delicate, fragile, unmistakable, reached their ears. A whimper. Dr. Harris stopped immediately, raising his hand to signal Linda to halt. The whimper came again, slightly louder this time. Following the sound through dense underbrush, pushing aside dripping branches, they emerged into a small opening. There, nestled beneath the twisted roots of a fallen oak, lay Grace. She was curled tightly around her litter, mud streaked through her fur, her breathing shallow. One pup lay motionless beside her, its tiny chest still. The other writhed weakly, its faint movements breaking the silence like delicate ripples on a pond. Linda gasped, tears brimming in her eyes. "Oh no!" Grace raised her head at the noise, her golden eyes meeting theirs. She didn't growl or flinch. She simply gazed at them, exhausted, worn, but not afraid. It was as if she recognized them. Dr. Harris lowered himself carefully, his voice gentle and steady. "Grace," he whispered, "it's me. You're safe now. Please let me help." Grace shuddered, lowering her head to the lifeless pup beside her, nudging it softly with her nose before releasing a low, sorrowful whine that pierced the quiet. The grief carried in that sound was raw, achingly human, endless in its depth. Tears streamed down Linda's face uncontrollably. "She's been out here trying to protect them," she murmured softly. Dr. Harris felt a tightness in his throat. Placing his bag down, he opened it and pulled out a blanket along with a syringe. "I can assist her," he said gently. "But we need to act quickly." A faint static noise came from behind them. Radio communication. The agents were drawing near. Grace's ears twitched as she glanced from the surrounding trees to Dr. Harris, then back to her pups. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to pause. Then, With a quiet gesture of trust, stronger than words, she nudged the smallest surviving pup toward him. Dr. Harris swallowed hard. "Good girl," he whispered, tears glimmering in his eyes. "I've got you." As he lifted the tiny pup carefully into his arms, Grace's expression softened. Though danger loomed, a trace of calm appeared in her eyes, knowing she was no longer alone. Cradling the fragile pup like a precious treasure, Dr. Harris noticed its shallow but steady breaths. Its fur was still damp from the storm. Linda wrapped it tenderly in a cozy blanket, hands trembling from the fear running through her veins. Grace observed them quietly, with tired but steady eyes, no longer hostile, only filled with desperation. From deeper within the misty forest, faint voices drifted, agents closing in, radios emitted static, boots squelched in the muddy ground, and the sharp clicks of weapons echoed softly among the trees. "We don't have much time," Linda whispered urgently. "If they find us here, they'll take her. They'll take all of them." Dr. Harris's thoughts swirled wildly. His gaze fell on Grace, a mother who had battled soldiers, harsh storms, and hunger, all to shield her babies. In that instant, everything he believed about science, control, and ownership crumbled. This wasn't merely an experiment. It was life itself fighting to survive. He knelt beside Grace, his tone gentle yet firm. "They designed you to be a tool," he said. "But you became something much more. You became a mother." Grace tilted her head, breathing softly, her eyes shimmering with fatigue, seemingly understanding his words. Linda rested a hand on his shoulder. Through tears, she whispered, "We can't save them all." "I know," Harris replied quietly, "but we can save her." Reaching into his coat pocket, he retrieved the small metallic chip, Project E9's device, the very one that had drawn government agents to their doorstep. He stared at it for a long moment before heaved it into the nearby river. The chip disappeared with a faint splash, swallowed by the flowing water. "No more experiments," he muttered. "No more monsters." Linda's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Erasing her trail," Harris answered. "If they can't track the chip, they won't find her. I'll tell them she didn't survive." From the distance, shouts grew louder. Grace's ears twitched as she rose unsteadily, nudging her remaining pups closer. Dr. Harris locked eyes with her. "Go," he urged quietly. "Run while you still can." Grace hesitated briefly, her gaze filled with trust and uncertainty, then slipped into the mist, her puppies trailing behind like shadows. Moments later, government agents arrived, scanning the area with urgency. Keller's piercing voice sliced through the fog. Where could she be? Dr. Harris met his gaze, his face void of emotion. She didn't survive. Keller frowned, scrutinizing him closely. Yet, before he could ask more, the distant rumble of thunder shattered the silence. Dr. Harris remained frozen, his eyes fixed on the mist where Grace had vanished. For the first time in many years, he experienced a mixture of grief and calm, knowing she was free at last, beyond their control. Weeks slipped by, and the turmoil that once engulfed the shelter gradually faded into quiet. The government investigation had concluded, the agents withdrew, and the tale of the mutated dog was buried deep beneath layers of classified documents. Officially, Grace and her offspring had died during the storm. In truth, she still roamed somewhere out there, alive, untamed, and free. Dr. Harris often found himself standing at the forest's edge, gazing into the vast expanse of green. He had honored his promise by falsifying the reports and erasing all remaining evidence. No one would ever track her down now. Yet each time the wind whispered through the branches, he was convinced he heard her distant bark, a low, steady sound that seemed like a quiet expression of thanks. One evening, Linda joined him, a soft smile breaking through the grief that lingered since that fateful night. "Do you think she's all right?" she asked gently. Dr. Harris's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "She survived the fire, the laboratory, and those who shaped her into what she is," he responded softly. "She'll be okay. She's tougher than any of us." On some nights, the two would leave offerings near the tree line, scraps of meat, blankets, and occasionally a note sealed in plastic. Though they never caught sight of her, the food consistently vanished by morning. Occasionally, a set of paw prints lingered in the mud, larger, more distinct, accompanied by smaller ones trailing behind. That was enough to reassure them she was still observing. Several months passed, and the shelter gradually returned to its familiar pace. New animals arrived for rescue, and adoptions once again filled the days with warmth. Yet, for Linda and Dr. Harris, something profound had shifted. They no longer perceived animals as helpless creatures. Instead, they recognized them as survivors, each bearing hidden stories of suffering, resilience, and love. One spring morning, as sunshine poured over the fields, a letter appeared at the shelter. It had no return address, just a folded piece of paper bearing 7 words written in uneven handwriting. "Tell the world she was never a monster." Dr. Harris felt a lump swell in his throat. Carefully folding the note, he placed it beside Grace's medical file, now permanently closed. Then, with a soft whisper, he said, "No, she wasn't. She was a miracle." That evening, he found himself standing at the edge of the forest once more. The sun sank beneath the trees, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Just as he prepared to leave, a familiar sound shattered the quiet, a deep, proud bark drifting on the breeze. Frozen in place, a weary smile spread across his face. Somewhere out there, Grace was alive and free, nurturing her young beneath open skies, far from cages, far from fear. Though her story would remain unknown to all but one man, he vowed to share it, not as a cautionary tale of science gone awry, but as a testament to a mother's love that defied all attempts by humanity to control it. If this tale moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Grace's bravery serves as a powerful reminder that every individual, regardless of their background, deserves an opportunity for freedom and love. Keep following us for more stories that will uplift, inspire, and show you the true meaning of compassion.